Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to another Mystery Monday. I hope you guys all had an amazing weekend. Happy Monday, the best day of the week because we get to hang out. If you're new here, welcome. We talk about true crime cases on Mondays on this channel. So if that's something that you're interested in, then please come and join us and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Before we do get into this one, I just quickly want to thank today's sponsor, Saley. I don't think I need to tell you guys by now how much I love Saley, but I'm gonna anyway. They're my go-to for an eSIM because they just make it so easy. I can't even explain to you guys how quick and easy they make it. You just need to try them for yourself to understand it because it's no joke. You go on the app, you select the country you want, you select the plan, and that's it. I'm not even kidding, it takes 30 seconds and you're set. I use Saley every single time I travel because they're available in over 200 countries and regions, so I've never not been able to use Saley. And also if you're going to multiple countries, they do regional and global plans as well, so you can just get one SIM instead of having to get multiple eSIMs for every country you're traveling to. They're affordable, especially in comparison to data roaming prices. You can activate their security features as well, so you're actually protecting your privacy on the web while using their eSIM. They're also available on both iOS and Android, and if you do get a plan and find out that for whatever reason your device is not eSIM compatible, they will give you a full refund. I mean, it is so good, guys, and having data while you're traveling and in an unfamiliar place is so important for so many reasons, even just from getting point A to B. So definitely make sure you guys check them out, and if you download the app and use code BELLAFIORE at checkout, you can actually get 15% off your first purchase of a Saley eSIM data plan. So I will leave all of the information for that in the description box down below, and let's go ahead and get into today's case. So today we're going to be talking about a case from North Carolina. In 2006, a young mother named Michelle Young, she was actually 5 months pregnant as well, when she was found dead in her home after a vicious attack. When she was found by her sister, she was found lying on the floor of her bedroom, and her 2-year-old daughter was found hiding under the bed covers in that room with her. It is truly such an awful case. All of the cases that we talk about, of course, are all awful, but there are really some that just hit you harder than others sometimes, and this is one of those cases. So Michelle Fisher was born on the 17th of February 1977 in New York. She grew up in Sayville, New York, and attended Sayville High School. Friends and family all described her as the all-American sweetheart. She was beautiful, she was popular in school, she was the co-captain of the cheerleading squad, and she was said to just be always smiling this infectious smile. She was described as enthusiastic, bubbly, and had a quiet confidence about her that just made people feel really easy around her. On top of that, she was extremely driven and she met everything in her life, including her studies, with enthusiasm. She wanted to become a tax lawyer, so after graduating from high school, she moved from New York to Raleigh, which is in North Carolina, to attend North Carolina State University, where she studied a finance degree. It was obviously a pretty big change to move from New York to Raleigh. Raleigh by no means is a small city, but New York is huge, and she had spent her entire life in New York. All of her friends and family lived there, and moving is always quite an adjustment, right? But she embraced the move like she did with everything else in her life, and that is with enthusiasm. She settled right in as well. She joined the cheerleading squad at the university, which she later decided to take a step back from so she could really focus more on her studies. 4 years later, she graduated from the university with a master's degree in accounting. By February 2001, Michelle was turning 24, and so her friends took her out to this bar called the Poor House to celebrate her birthday. While they were there was this guy there. She was at the bar. There was this guy there, and he knocked her drink over, and he just starts apologizing profusely. He buys her another drink, and pretty much the rest was history. His name was Jason Young, and they just hit it off right away. As it turned out, they both graduated from North Carolina State University, and they were both big fans of their football team there, which is called the Wolfpack. Jason was living with his mum at the time, and he was working as a salesman for a company called Black & Decker. And after this meeting, he started moving his schedule around so that he could be in Raleigh all of the time to see Michelle. They started pretty much spending every minute they could together until Jason eventually moved to Raleigh to be with Michelle, and they moved in together. They were definitely more of a case of opposites attract because by all accounts, Michelle had grown into this hardworking, mature, and caring young woman, whereas Jason, he hadn't quite grown up yet. He was known to be a little bit of a frat boy still. He was a bit immature. He was known to be a bit of a womanizer still. But he seemed to settle down with Michelle. And within 2 years of them meeting, Michelle found out that she was pregnant. And this was actually a massive shock to both of them. Neither of them had any plans on having a child anytime soon. Neither of them felt ready to have a child anytime soon. Initially, Jason definitely was not super excited about it because while both of them, it was a shock to both of them, neither of them had planned for this to happen. He was just really didn't feel ready. He was very scared and he didn't even feel ready for marriage at that point. Whereas Michelle, while it was a shock to her and she maybe wasn't ready either, once she found out she was pregnant, she wanted to have the baby. Over the next month, as the news sort of settled in, Jason, he started coming around, and ultimately the pregnancy did bring them closer together and they decided to get married. And they really weren't just marrying out of love and excitement for starting a family. Michelle didn't have insurance. So they got married before the baby came so that she could get on his insurance from his work, because having a baby in the US seems very, very expensive. From all the photos, it looked like and everyone that was there said it was a beautiful day full of joy and happiness. And 5 months later, on the 29th of March 2004, their daughter Cassidy was born. Michelle was a natural. She settled right into motherhood and she loved Cassidy more than anything. She was enthralled with her. She was over the moon after this pregnancy. And her sister Meredith also decided to move to Raleigh so that she could be closer and, help out with the baby. And then in 2005, the young family, including their dog, a rescue dog named Mr. G, moved into a new home. It was a large family home in the Enchanted Oaks subdivision in Raleigh. It was this big, beautiful, leafy home. It was very private. It was on this street called Birchleaf Drive. And it was big enough that they could easily have more of Michelle's family come and visit, including her mum, Linda, who she was super close with, which was not a dream for Jason actually, because him and Linda really didn't get along. Michelle and her mum, they spoke almost every single day on the phone, and they spoke about anything and everything, which obviously included Michelle's relationship with Jason. And they argued a lot. They had a very volatile relationship. He was pretty hot-headed, so they were just constantly fighting. And that really wasn't a secret to anybody in Michelle and Jason's life. They were very open about it. So Linda didn't really like Jason, and Jason didn't really like Linda, I think because he kind of resented the close bond that Michelle had with her mum, and that her mum pretty much knew all of his shortcomings and the strain in their relationship. So Linda would visit a lot. She would come to Raleigh, she would stay with them so that she could, or stay with them for periods of time so that she could help them with Cassidy. And eventually she wanted to move to North Carolina, and she even offered to help them renovate the house so that she could move in there, which Michelle was overjoyed with. She would be super happy for that to happen, but Jason, not so much. Anyway, by 2006, Michelle found out she was actually pregnant with their second child. And because this one was planned, Jason's reaction was apparently pretty different from the first time around. He was excited about this pregnancy, excited about having a second child and expanding their family. So they traveled to Jason's family's home in Brevard, which is still in North Carolina, but it's about 280 miles or 450 kilometers from Raleigh. And they went there to, share the good news with his family, celebrate the good news. But unfortunately, this trip would be anything but a celebration. While Cassidy was with her grandparents, Jason and Michelle popped out to get some coffee, and they ended up being in a pretty bad car accident where Jason ended up driving off this mountain road down an embankment, which was like 100-foot or 30-meter drop, and their car ended up partially submerged in a river. Both Jason and Michelle did survive the crash with, I guess, minor injuries, but the physical and mental stress of going through such a scary ordeal and such a bad car accident did cause Michelle to miscarry a few days later. So a few months later, in the summer of 2006, Jason got a new job, still working as a salesman, but now he was working for a medical records software company. And this new job allowed Michelle to drop down from full-time to part-time at her job as a senior financial consultant at a tax firm. So this was great news because Michelle actually found out that she was pregnant again, and this time with a baby boy. By Thursday, the 2nd of November 2006, Michelle was 5 months pregnant. And on that night, Jason had to leave to go to a work trip in Galax. Well, the work trip wasn't in Galax, it was in Clintwood, but that was about a 5-hour drive away. So he decided to drive halfway and stay at a hotel in Galax ahead of his 10 a.m. meeting the next day, which would be at a hospital in Clintwood. Clintwood was also near where his mum, Pat, lived. So he was going to do his work meeting at 10 a.m. on the Friday. Then that night he was going to go stay with his mum and his stepfather. And then he was going to be coming home the day after that on the Sunday because they had some friends coming over to watch the North Carolina State University football game that was happening on the Sunday. So on the Thursday night that he was leaving for his work meeting, Michelle decided to have a friend over. Her name was Shelly Shad, and she was a sorority sister of Michelle's, and they had remained close friends over the years. So she arrives at Michelle and Jason's home at around 6:30 p.m. Jason was still there at this point, and the girls were going to have dinner together, so she offered if Jason wanted to eat with them, which he said, no, no worries, I'm going to stop for dinner on my way, I'm just about to head out. So he doesn't have dinner with them. He leaves to start his drive, and Shelly and Michelle, they eat dinner, they bathe and get Cassidy ready for bed, and then they spend the night pretty much just watching Grey's Anatomy and chatting, just a girls' night. They're chatting away, and of course they end up chatting a little bit about Jason because Jason and Michelle had been having some issues, nothing new, but Michelle's mum Linda was planning on coming and staying with them for a big chunk of that period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so they had just been fighting about that a lot because Jason obviously wasn't happy because Linda, Jason, they just didn't really like each other, so he wasn't happy. Anyway, Shelly ends up leaving at around 10 to 10:30 p.m. And as she's leaving, as she's, gonna go walk out to her car, she ends up just having this really weird feeling. She said that she felt almost like they were being watched, or like the house was being watched. She really couldn't put her finger on why, but she just felt really unsettled. And so she even went as far as to ask Michelle to walk her to her car. And Michelle's walking her out to the car. She obviously tells Michelle about how she's feeling. And Michelle said, Jason and I actually have been hearing some weird noises around the house. And Shelly says, God, aren't you scared to be alone? Michelle's response to this apparently was, if someone's going to break in and their intention is to kill you, then that's what they're going to do. And that is actually the last time that Shelly saw her friend Michelle alive. The next day, on the 3rd of November at around 12:10 p.m., Michelle's sister Meredith gets a voicemail from Jason, and he basically says, can you please go over to the house? She lived pretty close by. I think she lived like 10-15 minutes from them. And he said, do you mind going by the house because I've left for a business trip and I've left all of these printouts at the printer upstairs in my home office. And these printouts were of a Coach bag. So he'd been looking on eBay at all of these Coach bags because he was planning to get one for Michelle for their anniversary. And he just, I guess, accidentally left all these printouts there. He didn't want Michelle to see them. And so he wanted Meredith to go over and just scoop them up before Michelle saw. And then the surprise would be ruined. And I guess he didn't realize that he had left them there. He left for his business trip and then he just got caught up, and the next day he was like, oh my God, She lets herself in through the garage door because their garage door was broken, so you could just kind of lift it up and head right on in. So she lifts it up, she goes into the garage door, and then she also lets herself into, there's a door in the garage that leads into their kitchen in their home. So she just lets herself, that had been broken for a little while now. So she also just lets herself into the house. Now, Michelle's car had been in the garage, so she knew that she was home. And then once she got inside as well, in the kitchen, on the kitchen counter, Michelle's purse and her keys were there as well. Everything is indicating that Michelle is home. But as soon as Meredith gets into the house, she immediately knew that something was wrong. She said there was this really unsettling feeling in the house. It was cold, it was dark, it was quiet. The only noise that she could hear was the sound of their dog, Mr. G, whimpering, and she couldn't even see him. She didn't know where the whimpering was coming from. She obviously called out to Michelle, but there was nothing. There was no response, and there was no sign of Michelle or Meredith's niece, Cassidy. Eventually, she makes her way up the stairs, and as she gets to the top of the stairs, she sees what she initially thinks is red hair dye, and it's smeared kind of all over the floor, and then it's all in that upstairs bathroom as well. And she's thinking that Cassidy has gotten into some red hair dye and just kind of smeared it around the house. From the top of this staircase, I believe that you can just kind of see the primary bedroom, and the door to the primary bedroom where Jason and Michelle slept was open. So from the top of that staircase, she could see into the bedroom, and she could see that her sister's body was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. And as she got closer, it was clear that she had been violently beaten to death. When Meredith reached out to touch her, her sister was cold and stiff, and she also noticed that there was a doll which had been placed against her body, likely by Cassidy, in what they believe was an attempt to comfort her mother. That red hair dye that she thought she saw in the hallway leading to the bathroom, and then more hair dye in that bathroom, those were actually tiny little footprints. And there was also blood all over the walls of that bathroom at around toddler height. While Meredith was processing the horrific scene, she heard some shuffling coming from the bed, and that is when 2-year-old Cassidy comes out from under the bed covers, and she had been hiding under those bed covers. She was dressed in clean pink pajamas, and she seemed really confused and lost. And once she comes out of the covers, she immediately goes over and she just clings to Meredith. And Meredith picks her up and, of course, immediately takes her out of the room, takes her outside, and calls 911. She appeared to be physically unharmed, but she told Meredith that she needed band-aids because her mum had boo-boos all over. Meredith, of course, immediately picks her up and takes her out of the room, and she calls 911 in a panic.
I need an ambulance.
Okay.
It's an emergency.
What address are you at, ma'am? Ma'am, what's your phone number in case I lose you? Problem, tell me exactly what happened.
I think my sister's dead.
Okay, tell me what happened, ma'am.
I have no idea. Oh my God.
All right, stay on the phone with me, please. What's your name?
Meredith Fisher.
Meredith.
And this is a young address. Oh my God.
Meredith, listen to me, please.
Yeah.
Are you with the patient now?
Yes, I'm her daughter. And
Okay.
she's
How old is the patient?
And there's blood everywhere. She's 28, 29.
28.
Should I try to move her?
Listen to me, ma'am.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you what to do, but
Okay.
you need to calm down so we can help her. You said there's blood everywhere?
Yes.
All right, is she conscious?
No, I don't think so. Should I try to help her?
Listen to me, ma'am.
I'm listening.
Is she breathing?
I don't think so.
Have you checked?
Michelle? She's cold.
Okay. Listen to me. Did you see what happened?
I don't know. Kathy, come here, sweetie. I'm here with her daughter.
Okay.
There's like blood footprints all over the house.
Okay, listen
my
to
daughter,
me.
like her daughter's little footprints.
Okay, listen to me. What's your first name?
Meredith?
All right, Meredith.
Yes, sir.
Did you see what happened?
I just came here on a fluke. I usually, don't come here during the day.
Okay.
She shouldn't be home. She should be at work.
Okay, listen to me.
Yes, sir. Hey, did you know what happened to Mommy? Did she fall?
She got dizzy everywhere, and she got...
Do you think she's beyond any help?
I don't know, honestly.
You don't know? All right.
I'm normally very good under
Okay.
pressure.
We're going to tell you what to do then, okay?
Yes, sir.
Are you right by her now?
I'm keeping her daughter out of there.
Okay. All right, so you're not with her?
I'm right outside the bedroom.
All right. Can you get her daughter secured? Can you carry the phone into where she's at?
Yes.
All right. Can you secure her daughter?
Cassidy, sweetie, can you stay in your room for 2 seconds, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Can you close the door for 2 seconds? I'll be right back in there, okay, sweetie?
All right. Can you get her on her back?
Okay. Oh, my God. Michelle? I don't think so. She's so heavy.
All right, see if you can get her on her back.
I really think she's dead.
Pardon?
I really think she's dead.
Okay. You can't roll her over?
Not easily.
All right, you're going to have to try.
Hang on, I'm trying to see if I can get her pulse.
We got to try to do CPR if we can get her on the back, Meredith.
So she's ice cold.
She's cold? Okay. All right.
And her body is stiff.
Okay. Then don't try. If she's cold, then there's
Oh my God,
probably nothing else you can do.
Should I not touch anything?
All right. Try not to touch anything more than you did. Was anything out of place or unusual when you came in?
This place does not look like what it normally looks like.
Okay.
There's blood in the bed.
Okay. All right. Try not to touch anything else, okay?
Okay, I just moved a pillow.
I just leave everything exactly where it is now.
When emergency services arrived on the scene, Michelle's body was discolored, cold, and stiff, and they confirmed that she was dead and that she had been for some time. She was found dressed in sweatpants and a zip-up sweatshirt, and she was found lying face down on the floor in her primary bedroom that she shared with Jason. She was found lying between the bed and the closet labeled his closet, and that closet door was open, and there was blood found on the outside of that closet door. Decorative pillows were strewn around the room. Most of them were on the floor. And there were impressions of a bloody shoe print on 2 of these pillows. One was consistent with a size 12 Hush Puppy brand shoe. The other was consistent with a size 10 Airfit or Franklin athletic shoe. There were no signs of forced entry into the home, even though the garage door was broken. It had been broken for some time before this had happened. There were 2 drops of blood that were found on the doorknob of the door that led from the kitchen out to the garage, and this was later confirmed to be Michelle's blood. 2 drawers of Michelle's jewelry box were also missing, as well as her engagement and her wedding rings, both of which she was said to never take off. And neither of those rings were ever recovered. Nothing else around the house appeared to have been taken. It didn't seem like the house had been ransacked or burglarized or like anything else was missing. Everything else in the house appeared to be in order. They also found empty bags thrown across the floor, which seemed like someone was kind of in the middle of cleaning the scene and then they just kind of abandoned it and left. They also found a single strand of hair in Michelle's left hand, and then under her body they also found a small clump of hair, and testing later confirmed that both of these bits of hair belonged to the same person. Cassidy was also checked and she was found to be physically unharmed. There was some blood found on her toenails and on the bottom of her pajama pants, but these I believe were found during testing. It was such a small amount of blood that generally it wasn't really visible to the naked eye. She didn't appear to be distressed or traumatized at this point when the paramedics arrived, and she was still talkative when they got there. She was also no longer wearing a diaper. She wasn't found wearing a diaper despite the fact that she wasn't potty trained yet. Meredith confirmed that she didn't clean Cassidy in any way. She just picked Cassidy up and immediately called 911. And this meant that after her mother was attacked, somebody cared enough to put her in new clothes and clean her up before they fled the scene. As I mentioned earlier, small footsteps, so most likely Cassidy's, were found on the carpet that led to the bathroom. And then the footsteps kind of stop and then they start again inside the bathroom. So it seems like somebody picked her up and took her into the bathroom, maybe to clean her. There was no blood found in the actual bathtub in that bathroom, but there was blood everywhere else, right? There was blood. Her small bloody footprints were all over the floor of that bathroom. There was blood on the walls at around toddler height. There was blood on a little step stool in there, and markings of blood were also on the inside of the door, meaning that Cassidy had likely been closed in that bathroom at some point. This all also indicates the fact that she did have her mother's blood on her at some point, and that the person who attacked her mother cleaned her up, put her in new pajamas, cleaned the blood off her, and made sure she was okay before they fled the scene. It also appeared that the scene was isolated to the top floor, so everything in the first floor appeared to be untouched. There was nothing askew, nothing missing, no ransacking, no blood down there, aside from those 2 drops of blood on the door that led from the kitchen to the garage. Outside the home, there was also a hose, which was found on the pathway. It was found still dripping, and there was kind of a patch of the pathway as well that was wet, so it seemed like somebody had kind of hosed it down, but no blood was found on the pathway, on the hose, or anywhere outside. Michelle's autopsy revealed that she had suffered extensive injuries. She was strangled and had 13 lacerations to the back of the head. She suffered blunt force trauma to her head, which was inflicted by a heavy, likely round object, and she was hit with this at least 30 times. This resulted in multiple fractures to her skull as well as brain hemorrhaging. Her lips were badly bruised and multiple teeth had been knocked out in the frenzied attack. The property and the surrounding areas were searched for the murder weapon, but it was never recovered. The medical examiner didn't provide a time of death, and investigators, when they were trying to determine when the attack could have taken place, they found that there was a trail of blood that led from the bed to where Michelle's body was laying on the floor between the bed and the open closet door. And there was also blood on the bed linens, which may have suggested that she was attacked in her sleep. However, she was found fully clothed in a sweatsuit, and her treadmill was also turned on, but it wasn't running. So this indicated that she had actually woken up for an early morning workout on the treadmill and was attacked in the process of doing so. And so this led investigators to believe that the attack actually happened potentially closer to 5 to 6 a.m. Due to the violent nature of the crime, it also indicated a crime of passion, and so investigators believed that the attacker was known to Michelle. So after the paramedics arrived at the home, Meredith, of course, the first thing she did was she called her mum to tell her what had happened. Linda then called Jason's mum, Pat, and Pat told her that Jason was actually on the way to her house right in that very moment because he had finished his sales call and he was on the way to her home in Brevard. So as soon as he arrived at her home, Jason's stepdad informed him of Michelle's death. Michelle's sister Meredith then called Jason and told him that the death was a homicide and told him to come to her house when he came to Raleigh because the police were obviously at his house and it had been cordoned off as a crime scene. So of course, as soon as he gets off the phone with Meredith, he and some of his family members immediately get in the car and they make the 4.5-hour drive from Brevard to Raleigh. During this drive, he starts getting some calls from some of his friends that had obviously heard what had happened, and I guess they had been contacted by the police. So they called Jason and they said, the police have been asking about your marriage and what your marriage was like, if you were having any problems, and so Jason decided to hire an attorney. He declined to answer any questions from the police, even basic questions about Michelle. He didn't answer a single question from the police under advice of counsel. He also refused to go to the home and do a walkthrough with the police to show them if anything was missing, if anything was kind of not as it should be at the house. He also never asked authorities about Michelle's death, and he never asked about the well-being of his daughter. So he was uncooperative with police from the very beginning, which of course raised red flags for the investigators. So Jason, his mother Pat, his sister, and his brother-in-law arrived at Michelle's sister Meredith's house sometime between 9 and 10 p.m. on the 3rd of November. As soon as he arrived at the house, Jason's first thing that he did was go and check on his daughter Cassidy, of course. And when police came to try and ask him questions, he once again refused to speak to them. Meredith was asked by the police if there were any issues in Jason and Michelle's marriage. And she said, they did fight, but it wasn't anything too ridiculous. But then as investigators started talking to more friends and more family, they realized just how many problems they were having in their marriage. Their marital issues were no secret to pretty much anybody that knew them. They publicly fought in public. They would have screaming matches in public. They would fight in front of their friends and in front of their family. And they frequently told their friends and their family about their marital problems. They also found that Jason was unfaithful in the marriage, and through his phone records, they found that he actually called his girlfriend as much as he called his wife. Now, despite Jason's refusal to answer a single question from police and his refusal to tell them where he was and what he was doing, they were able to put together a timeline of his whereabouts. So they found that he had left the family home on Birchleaf Drive in Raleigh at around 6:30 p.m. on the 2nd of November, which is the night before Michelle was murdered, because she was likely murdered in the early hours of the next day on the 3rd of November. At around 7:30 p.m., he stopped at a fuel station in Raleigh to fill up his car, and his car was a white Ford SUV. After he filled up his car, he called his mother Pat and basically said that he was going to check with Michelle to see if after his work meeting the next day, he'd be able to stay at her house and then go back home on the Saturday. Because obviously where his meeting was taking place in Clintwood, it was quite close to where his mum lived in Brevard. Anyway, so then he continues on and he goes and gets dinner at a Cracker Barrel in Greensboro, which he did at about 9:30 p.m. At 10:54 p.m., he's seen on surveillance footage checking into the Hampton Inn in Galax, and he entered his hotel room with his keycard at 10:56 p.m. And that was the only time he used his hotel keycard, so he never used it again. And from the lack of use of that keycard and from the surveillance footage of the hotel, it would appear that he never left his hotel room again until the next day when he left to go to his work meeting. He also used an express checkout at the hotel, so he didn't need to go to the front desk and check out, which means they didn't actually know what time he checked out of the hotel. However, they did use his phone records. They saw that he called his mum, and at around 7:40 a.m., his phone pinged to a tower in Whiteville, Virginia, and that basically showed that he was on his way to his sales meeting, which was at Dickinson Community Hospital in Clintwood. Now, despite this alibi, Jason was a suspect in this case almost immediately, and not just because of his refusal to help the police and how uncooperative he was, not just because of his marital problems and his infidelity, but there were just so many things at the scene that didn't add up. And there was also no other suspects, by the way. So he was just immediately a suspect. Now, first of all, there were no signs of forced entry into the house, and the attack was extremely brutal. And both of these things indicated that the attacker was somebody that was known to Michelle, or more so, somebody that was close to Michelle. Jason's closet also had blood on the outside of the closet, but when her body was found, the closet door was open and there was no blood on the contents of the closet. So this indicated to investigators that basically the attack happened while the closet was closed, and then after the attack, if he was the attacker, he had opened it to retrieve a fresh change of clothes from his closet. Also, the fact that the attack was extremely brutal, it was extremely personal, it was a crime of passion, no doubt, but Cassidy was completely unharmed, and in fact, she was even cleaned up after the attack. And investigators felt that that pointed again towards Jason. Also, on the home computer, they found that there was a search history at an undetermined time for searches such as the anatomy of a knockout, head trauma blackout, head blow knockout, and head trauma. Now, Jason was analysed by officers at the Wake County Sheriff's Department on the 7th of November, and they found that he had no cuts, no bruises, no injuries, other than a bruised and broken toenail. Investigators also seized his car, and they visited the hotel room that he stayed at on the night of the 2nd of November. And of course, they forensically examined both of these and found no traces of blood, no fibers, no nothing to tie him to the crime. But investigators were convinced that he was involved. They were convinced that something wasn't right. They were missing something. Everything pointed to him having been involved. They're also thinking, the circumstances of his alibi don't add up. There are really no other potential suspects in this case. They couldn't find anybody that had a reason to or would want to harm Michelle. So for the next 3 years, they continued to build their case against Jason and look into him as the suspect. And eventually, on the 14th of December 2009, Jason Young was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. He pled not guilty, and his trial began in June of 2011. So during the trial, the prosecution basically argued that Jason and Michelle were having both marital and financial problems, that Jason was having multiple affairs, and that he basically no longer wanted to be married, and he didn't want to have this baby with Michelle because she was 5 months pregnant, mind you, when she was murdered. And so basically what the prosecution did is they retraced Jason's steps from the night of the 2nd of November and the early morning hours of the 3rd of November, and they painted a timeline of inconsistencies that would have allowed Jason time to drive back to Raleigh and murder his pregnant wife. And they also brought in witnesses to back up this timeline. So what they said is that the initial timeline is correct. He left his home at 6:30 p.m., got fuel, ate dinner, and checked in to the Hampton Inn Hotel in Galax at 10:49 p.m. As we know, he used his key card to enter his room at the hotel at 10:56 p.m., and then he never used it again, which would indicate that he never left his room, at least until the next day when he left for his work conference. But the prosecution argued that he did leave his room, and he did this by propping open his door to his hotel room and then also an emergency exit door at the hotel, and he put like a little rock in this emergency door so that he could come and go without using his key card, and then it would seem like he never left his hotel room. The jury was shown surveillance footage of Jason checking in at 10:49 p.m. on the 2nd of November. That same surveillance camera conveniently stopped working and went black at 11:20 p.m. And the prosecution argued that this was a result of Jason basically tampering with that camera and unplugging that camera so that he could kind of come and go as he pleased and the camera wouldn't see him, because that camera was located right next to the emergency exit door. An employee of this hotel, his name is Keith Hicks, he testified at the trial that he found a small red rock propping the emergency door open, and this door was normally locked between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. So he goes back and he reviews the camera footage, which is when he finds that it stopped working at 11:20 p.m. He goes back to the camera to investigate what had happened, if it was broken, what was going on, and he finds that the camera has actually been unplugged.
Or anywhere between 4 or 5 a.m. I noticed that the camera was unplugged, facing to an emergency exit door. So when I went around to do the papers and deliver the papers, I had went up to the first floor, into the first floor hallway, went through the exit door, and noticed that the emergency door was propped open with a rock. And the emergency doors, you can only access from the inside. You can't get it back in from the outside. So I thought it was weird that they were propped open. I also thought it was weird the camera was unplugged.
He calls a maintenance worker to come and plug it back in and fix it up. Maintenance worker arrives, he gets a step ladder and he plugs it back in at 5:50 a.m. on the 3rd of November. And this maintenance worker also testified at the trial that somebody who was over 6 foot would easily be able to unplug that camera, and Jason is 6'1". After the camera was plugged back in at 5:50 a.m., it continues to work normally until 6:34 p.m., at which point somebody points the camera up towards the ceiling so that you can't see anything but the ceiling.
It probably wasn't anywhere 15-20 minutes later that while the breakfast lady was setting up her breakfast and everything was going on in the morning, I looked back at the monitor, and the same camera had been shoved up into the roof. Someone had come in, I'm assuming it's whoever unplugged the camera, and seen that the camera was unplugged and did not want to be seen, and they took their hand and they shoved it up into the ceiling. So the only thing that the camera was facing was the ceiling.
Keith Hicks testified that this camera was never unplugged. It had been working for years, for several years. The only time it had been tampered with and had stopped working for any period of time was several years earlier, when some guests had unplugged it so they could sneak in and out of that exit emergency door. So basically the prosecution argued that after Jason checked in, he left his hotel room, he tampered with this camera and unplugged it so that he could come and go as he pleased. He was the one that put the red rock, the small red rock, propping the emergency exit door open. He left 11:20 p.m., drives back to Raleigh, murders his pregnant wife, and then comes back. And he must have gotten back at around 6:34 p.m. when the camera is tampered with again to face up towards the ceiling. And we know he's left the hotel by then, because at around 7:40 a.m. is when we know he's on the road, he calls his mum, and he's on his way to his sales meeting. His fingerprints, however, were not found on that camera. To back up this timeline, the prosecution calls a witness to the stand named Gracie Calhoun. She worked at a fuel station in King, North Carolina, which was along the route Jason would have taken to drive between the Hampton Inn Hotel in Galax and his home in Raleigh. So Gracie testifies that at around 5 to 5:30 a.m., a man pulls up to the fuel station, and he pulls up to the furthest pump away. And this is a person in a white SUV. And reminder, Jason drives a white Ford SUV. After this man attempts to use the fuel nozzle a couple of times, he comes into the store and he starts yelling at her and swearing at her because the fuel nozzle isn't working. Gracie explains to the man that this is just regular procedure, that at this time, this is 5:30 a.m. So at this time, they have a procedure where basically you have to come in, give them your credit card and your ID, and then they will turn the pump on for you. So she explains that to him. She asks for his credit card, his ID, and he basically just throws $20 in cash at her and then leaves the store, goes back to the pump, pumps $15 worth of fuel, and then he just speeds off without collecting his change. And Gracie identified this man as Jason Young through a photo ID. She said that she remembered him because she wouldn't soon forget an experience like that where a man was cussing at her and yelling at her and being so aggressive with her, especially in response to a routine request. A woman named Terry Tiller also took the stand to say that she had been delivering newspapers in the area of the Youngs' home on Birchleaf Drive. And this was on the 3rd of November at around 3:30 to 4 a.m. And at this time, she saw a light-colored SUV sitting either in the driveway of the Youngs' home or on the street in front of their home. Another woman named Cynthia Beaver also testified at the trial that she had seen a light-colored, what she described as a soccer mum car, in the driveway of the Young's house at around 5:20 a.m. on the 3rd of November. And she said that she saw a white man in the driver's seat and potentially a female in the passenger seat. The prosecution also showed evidence that Jason had made several calls on the morning of the 3rd of November, and each of these calls lasted about 10 seconds. And they basically argued that this is the pattern of somebody who is kind of panicked and frantic. You know, he's just calling a bunch of people and he's calling them for 10 seconds at a time. They also said that on the night of the 2nd of November, he made several phone calls to Michelle as well. He was also 35 minutes late for his sales meeting, which Jason claimed was because he got lost on the way. But the representative of the hospital at the meeting said that when Jason arrived, he was very hyper and very nervous. After his meeting, at around 12:06 p.m., he fills up his car with more fuel. And this is also when he makes that call to Michelle's sister Meredith, asking her to go to the house and, collect those printouts of the Coach bags that he was planning on getting Michelle for their anniversary, so that she didn't see them. And this, of course, is when Meredith goes to the house and discovers her sister's dead body. And I mean, that is so insane, right? Because if he's guilty, he has called Meredith basically so that she would go and discover her own sister's dead body. That's the whole reason he made that call, which is so incredibly traumatic for her to have to go and experience and see that scene. And not only that, but 2-year-old Cassidy was at the house. She was hiding under the bed sheets. She had put a doll against her mother's lifeless body to try and comfort her. Her little bloody footprints were all around the house, so she had walked in her own mother's blood, and clearly quite a lot of it had gotten on her because it was all around that bathroom. It was on the walls as well at toddler height. I can't even put into words how sadistic that is. Leaving your 2-year-old daughter with her mother's dead body at the scene of the crime. And also, mind you, the photos of this Coach bag that he's left in the printer because he's researching an anniversary gift he wants to get Michelle, their anniversary was a month earlier in October. So it doesn't even add up. It was just an excuse for him to get Meredith to go to the house. Cassidy's teacher at daycare, her name is Brooke Bass, she said that when Cassidy returned to daycare on the Monday, so just a few days after her mother was murdered, that when she was at daycare, she was a lot quieter and kept to herself a lot more than usual that week. She also said that Cassidy was seen playing with 2 dolls. So there was a doll with long brown hair that she called the mummy doll, and then there was another female doll that had short hair, and she was seen hitting these 2 dolls together. And when another teacher went up to her and asked what she was doing, she told this teacher that mummy is getting a spanking for biting. Later, after she laid that doll face down on a dollhouse, she said, "Mummy has boo-boos all over. Mummy has red stuff all over." After the teachers told the police about this, Cassidy never returned to that school. The prosecution also painted a picture to the jury of Michelle and Jason's marriage. It was no secret to any of their friends and family that the only reason they really got married is because Michelle found out she was pregnant and they wanted her on Jason's insurance before the baby was born. It was also no secret to anyone in their lives, as we've spoken about, that they argued a lot. Michelle's sister Meredith told police that they would get into screaming matches in public, and also said that on the 1st of November, so one day before the murder, that they had gotten into an argument and Jason had actually thrown a remote at his wife. So they argued in public, they argued in front of friends and family, they told all of their friends and family often about their arguments and about their issues. And in fact, the prosecution said that just 3 weeks prior to the murder, Jason told one of his friends that he was done with Michelle. Both Michelle's mother Linda and her sister Meredith also testified that they had both told Michelle that she should leave Jason, but that Michelle was determined to make the marriage work. Linda also testified that Michelle had told her that Jason doesn't make love to her, rather he is perverted about it. And also that when Michelle was away on business trips herself, that Jason would have female friends stay over at their house. The court heard that he had had at least 2 affairs prior to the murder. She also testified that after the funeral, Jason moved in with his parents and he brought Cassidy with him, and that he essentially just cut Michelle's family off. So when they would try to call her, when they would try to write her, when they would try to organize visits with her, they would send her cards, they would send her gifts, they were all returned to sender, and they just couldn't get in contact with Cassidy. He just completely cuts them off. So Linda hires a lawyer, and her and the rest of Michelle's family get into basically a custody battle to try and get some sort of custody arrangement with Jason for Cassidy.
I thought we were about to reach an agreement for a visitation schedule, which is about a weekend every month and then about a week over the summer. And we had agreed upon what weekends those would be for the schedule kind of throughout the year. And my attorney called us into the office to sit and review kind of the final copy. And everything was as we agreed upon, January this weekend, February this weekend, and then come August 1st, that primary custody would be transferred to me. She would start school in Wake County. She would live with me on a full-time basis, and he would kind of be in every other weekend schedule to visit her.
One of Jason's, girlfriends also testified at the trial. Her name is Michelle Money, so we're going to call her Michelle too, because otherwise I think it just gets a little confusing. So Michelle too was a college friend and sorority sister of Michelle's. So some friend, right? I mean, who needs enemies when you have friends like Michelle Money? She actually met Jason at Michelle and Jason's wedding, which is insane. Anyway, she testified that as of September 2006, so 2 months before the murder, she and Jason were basically talking all the time. It was found that they contacted each other 980 times in a 1-month period. He even came to visit her in Orlando for a weekend on the 7th of October, which also happens to be his anniversary weekend with Michelle. Jason went on to tell a friend that he was in love with Michelle Money. He and Michelle were in contact 51 times on the day before the murder. She was also the last person that he contacted on the 2nd of November, and the first person he contacted on the 3rd of November at 7:49 a.m., which is the day that Michelle's body was discovered. Michelle too also testified that Jason had told her he was deeply unhappy in his marriage and that he wanted to leave Michelle to be with her. Another woman named Carol Ann Salby also testified at the trial. She had known Jason since they were teenagers and had visited him just 10 days before Michelle's murder. So she'd gone to see him while Michelle was out of town, and they had sex on the living room couch. She also said that during the visit, Jason took her wedding ring off and pretended to swallow it, but gave it back to her the next day. The prosecution also brought Jason's ex-fiancée, Genevieve Cargill, to the stand. She testified that she had been a victim of Jason's domestic abuse. During one argument, she said that Jason violently pulled off her engagement ring. They were at a wedding and Jason was really drunk. They argued about him being drunk, and he just got really angry and he demanded the ring back. And when she couldn't get it off, he started forcefully pulling it off. She said, "I've never seen him like that before. His eyes were completely empty and deserted and glazed over like he wasn't seeing me." She also said that during another argument, he punched and broke the windshield of their car, and during another argument, he punched a hole in the wall. After their breakup, they were no contact for years until the 12th of September 2006. She gets an email from Jason saying that he still loved her. So the defense argued that the prosecution hadn't provided any actual credible evidence against Jason. So there was no fingerprints, DNA, fibers, blood, anything like that found in his car, in the hotel room, on his clothes. There was basically no DNA evidence whatsoever tying him to the crime. And also when he was examined on the 7th of November, of course he had no injuries, no cuts, no bruises, nothing aside from his broken and bruised toenail. Which nobody mentions this, but they never found the murder weapon, and it was said to be, this round, heavy object. I wonder if he dropped it on his foot. I wonder if that was something to do with the murder. And also, his DNA and his fingerprints and everything are all over the crime scene because he lives there. So that's another thing that makes it complicated. Anyway, so Jason also testified at the trial, and he testified that he didn't believe that he and Michelle argued more than other couples. And while he wasn't the perfect husband, he loved Michelle and was committed to working on his marriage, which sounds like a load of bullshit because 2 of his girlfriends testified at the trial. It doesn't really sound like making the marriage work, if you ask me. He also testified that he was excited about the birth of his son, and emails were presented that were between Jason and Michelle, where on the 24th of October 2006, he basically, said that he was willing to go to counseling with her. The defense also argued that there wouldn't have been enough time for Jason to drive from his hotel in Galax back to Raleigh and then back to Clintwood, which is in, even further away, to get to his meeting, which he was late for. And in Jason's testimony, he said that he was late because he got lost. Jason testified that he had recently started a new job as, the sales at this new medical resource sales company, and that he was really nervous about this new job. So after checking into the hotel, he said he went over some notes and reviewed the software that he was going to use at the meeting. He says that he then left his hotel room. So he admits at the trial that he left his hotel room. So he says that he left his laptop charger in his car, so he went out to get that. And he realized that he had left his hotel keycard in the room, so he propped open the emergency exit door so he can go out, get the charger and come back in without the key card. Can I also say that when I was listening to this testimony, what stuck out to me is that if he's saying that he had to prop the emergency door open because he forgot his key card, by the point you've realized that, you've already propped open your own hotel room door. You know what I mean? You need a key card to get into your hotel room, the room itself, not just the emergency door. So you've already propped that open. For what purpose? Because you knew you didn't want to use the hotel room key card. Anyway, so then he says he goes back into his room. He's in there for a bit, reviewing, watching a sports game, whatever. And then he wants to go and have a cigar. So he does the same thing. He props open the doors so that he doesn't have to use his key card for whatever reason. I don't know why you would have an issue with using the key card, but he goes out and he smokes a cigar. I think he grabs a copy of USA Today, the newspaper or whatever, from the front desk, and then he goes back into his room.
Did you kill your wife, Michelle?
No, sir.
Were you there when it happened?
No, sir.
Do you know who did it?
No, sir, I do not.
Did her getting pregnant cause you to get married?
No, it didn't cause us to get married. It certainly expedited the marriage. It sped up.
Made it happen sooner?
Absolutely. It made it happen. It made it happen sooner. I think it was eventually going to happen. On my schedule, it would have probably been stretched out a little more. On her schedule, it would have probably been a little sooner. So it expedited both of those schedules.
Also, during his testimony, he spoke about the internet searches that they found on his computer, and he said that he made them, but he made them before the murder, not in relation to the murder. They were in relation to another accident that he had witnessed. At the end of the trial, it was actually a hung jury with 8 people voting for acquittal. So only 4 of the 12 jury members voted for him being guilty. And of course, because it was a hung jury, it was a mistrial. There was a mistrial. His second trial began in February of 2012, and Jason did not testify at this trial, but a recording of his testimony from his first trial was shown to the jury. Now, by the time this second trial had come around, Michelle's family had actually won a wrongful death slayer civil lawsuit against Jason. And this is basically a civil lawsuit filed by family members or dependents of a person who died due to another person's wrongful act or negligence. Jason didn't actually fight this civil lawsuit, so a default judgment was made against him, and $15.5 million in damage was awarded to Michelle's family. At the civil suit hearing as well, a detective at the Wake County Sheriff's Department also said that the murder was, quote, the most severe physical beating I've ever seen someone encounter. This was pretty extreme, a pretty vicious attack that she underwent. Evidence of this civil trial and the outcome of the civil trial was allowed at Jason's second criminal trial, and they also allowed evidence of the custody battle that he went through with Michelle's family, where he ended up giving full parental rights to Michelle's sister Meredith. The jury heard testimony from the civil trial, which said, quote, in the early morning hours of November 3rd, 2006, Jason Young brutally murdered Michelle Young at their residence. So at the end of Jason's second trial, the jury deliberated for 6 hours before finding Jason Young guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and during sentencing, Judge Donald Stevens spoke of the extreme violence that led to Michelle's death and how Jason only stopped beating her when he became too exhausted to continue. Jason's defense did file an appeal, arguing that the results of the civil trial and the judgment from the civil trial, and also Cassidy's custody arrangement, shouldn't have been allowed in that second trial because they knew it was prejudicial. They argued that in the first trial, 8 jury members found him not guilty, and the only thing that changed between the 2 trials is that in the second trial, they allowed the evidence of the civil suit and the custody arrangement, and then the verdict went from 8-4 to 0-12. They did actually win this appeal, and Jason was awarded a new trial, but in May of 2015, the Supreme Court overturned this decision, meaning that the third trial wouldn't go ahead and his first-degree murder charge would remain. And that's it. That's where this case is up to. As of April 2025, prison records show that Jason is now 50, and he's in a medium security Piedmont Correctional Institution in Salisbury, thankfully. But that's everything. That's all for this case. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below, because this is one of those cases that really, I don't know, it just hit me harder than usual, because it's, you know, just the thought of those tiny little bloody footprints, the fact that Michelle is 5 months pregnant when she was murdered. She so clearly is trying to make it work with this guy, you know, maybe due to the family, I don't know, maybe, you know, she loves him obviously, and he is just awful in every single way. He's cheating on her, he's, you know, now guilty of murdering her while she's 5 months pregnant. You know, she's got this whole life ahead of her. And the fact that her sister found her, and there's that, you know, that little doll leaning up against her body, and Cassidy is hiding under the bed sheets. This case really hit me hard, honestly. And I don't know, I feel like, you know, even 2 years old, things from when you're a kid really stay with you and affect you. But hopefully now that, you know, she's with Michelle's family, they can and have helped bring her up in a way that, you know, hopefully it doesn't or hasn't affected her too much. But yeah, that's everything. That's all for this case. That's all from me. I will be in the comments to chat to you guys about this one as always. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I will see you guys in my next video. Bye guys.